Well, good evening, everyone. Whatever we do tonight will be taped for posterity. It'll be on the internet by tomorrow, on YouTube by the day after that. For those of you not familiar with YouTube, don't do anything embarrassing tonight or you will become very familiar with YouTube. Tonight's our second meeting of the planning process. It's called the vision meeting because we're going to try to develop some visions for tonight, some visions for this community. Not visions for tomorrow, but visions for the year 2026. So as we go through the evening, and certainly when we get into the visioning exercise, and you're going to hear me say this 5, 12, 16 more times tonight, think about your answers to the questions that we'll ask as if it were the year 2026. And be visionary. No place for practicality here tonight. Visionary. If you believe that you want light rail Amtrak access between Sevastopol and pick the city of your choice, Chicago, Washington, D.C., whatever, don't let budgetary constraints or other practical constraints hold you back. A vision is just that. If you have a vision for something for the future of this community, it's incumbent upon me and Eric and my colleagues to identify the ways in which you can achieve that vision. So don't be constrained by practical matters, all right? That's what implementation's all about. I guarantee you when we get into chapter 12, I'm probably not going to be talking about spaceports. Unless, of course, you really feel there's a need for spaceports in Sevastopol, which would be infinitely cool. You'd be the only community, actually you'd be the second one in the United States. I think Alamogordo, Mexico is talking about being the first city in the United States to have a spaceport. So, first couple of minutes, we'll just go over some background for those of you who weren't here at the first meeting. Joanne sends her regrets. She's feeling ill tonight. I assume last night may have had something to do with that. Now that that's over, no more commercials for at least another 6 months or so before the 2008 presidential campaign starts. If I could ask each one of the planning committee members to please stand and just say your name out loud so your friends and neighbors know who you are. And if we could start on the left, we'll go around the outside and then come back in the middle.
I'm Bob Straka. Charlie Jarman.
Sorry, Charlie.
Sonia Jordan. Susie Wick.
Next planning committee member, right over here. Go ahead, Leaf.
Leaf Lockhart. Dick Weber. Dick Chappelle.
Thank you all. And town board members here tonight, if you could just raise your hand and state your name so everybody knows who you are. My name's Jeff. Gentleman to my left, your right is Eric. And that's Laddie, and Laddie's going to be taping us tonight. So, background on us, Omni was hired by the town some time ago. We've been around for a while. We've done a bunch of these plans. And if you have any questions about what we do or how we do it, feel free to ask me at any time. What is smart growth? As I mentioned in the last meeting, it's a legislative or statutory requirement in the state of Wisconsin. It's called Act 9. It was signed into law by Governor Thompson in 1999. Requires that every town, village, city, county, and regional planning commission in the state of Wisconsin have in place an approved, adopted comprehensive plan by January 1, 2010. If you don't, what does that mean? Well, basically, you give up a considerable amount or the entire ability that you have to affect land use changes at the local level. In other words, without an approved comprehensive plan, you will no longer have the power to implement a subdivision ordinance or a zoning ordinance if you already have those powers. Those powers would defer to the next level up in government. In this case, it would be the county. It also defines what a comprehensive plan is. I'll talk about that very briefly. And most importantly, it provides communities, many communities that have never participated so directly in the planning for the future of their community. It provides you with direct input into planning for that future. Why is your community doing this? Aside from the legislative requirement, you live in a beautiful place. And the goal of a plan like this is to make sure that as development occurs, if you want development to occur, it occurs in a way that respects the existing natural environment, that is in harmony with the natural environment. If you want to maintain and, if possible, increase high quality of life up here, you want to deal with those challenges, whatever those challenges may be. And we're going to talk some demographics in a little bit, and we'll give you an idea of what some of the challenges I see or I anticipate in this community, many of which I'm sure you're probably very familiar with. But the most important thing is it's an opportunity to achieve your goals and your visions, not mine, not Eric's, definitely not Laddie's. It's your plan. It'll be developed based upon input from you in meetings like tonight and all the meetings that follow. If you have visited the website since our last meeting, you'll notice that there's a summary of the meeting up there. There are going to be some digital images that'll be put up there. Your comments during the SWOT exercise and during the values exercise will drive the development of the comprehensive plan chapters. So based upon what you tell me, I will use that to draft those first chapters, to have a direction or a goal for those first chapters, as will your input in this meeting tonight in terms of driving the goal. So public meetings, planning exercises, there's the website. I'll finish up the end tonight talking more about the website and your ability to participate. In the end, the plan will be adopted by the town board and implemented by the Plan Commission. As I mentioned the last time, Smart Growth or Act 9 requires 9 elements or 9 chapters be included in every plan. Chapters are over here. If you have any questions about any of those chapters tonight, feel free to yell. How can you participate? Well, hopefully you'll continue to attend public meetings. Work with the planning committee. We're going to have a cognitive mapping exercise, probably late summer to early winter next year, 2007. And then at the very end of this process, we'll have an open house and a public hearing. In between those, there will be a variety of meetings to discuss each one of the chapters. Those will all be public. They'll all be posted. I encourage you to attend those meetings as well. And then again, feel free to follow the progress on the internet. Does anybody have any questions about Smart Growth, Act 9, comprehensive plans, why you're doing this? Complaints about how the election went? I'm sorry, let's not go there. So, some of the issues that this plan will likely address. Community character. Do you see the future of Sevastopol as a bedroom community? In other words, a place where people tend to live but not really work. They travel other places to work. Or do you see it as a more diverse, economic-oriented community? Do you see businesses? Do you desire to attract businesses to the community? What role do you see farming playing in the future of this community? If farming is still a viable enterprise within Sevastopol, is it farming like it's always been, or is it a new kind of farming? How do you feel about economic development, commercial development, industrial development? What about housing? How do you feel about the housing choices here, the housing prices here? We have an aging population. Do we have adequate enough housing for an aging senior population? Is the housing that exists sufficient for seniors, desirable to seniors? Land development, with the highway expansion, with everything that has happened in Door County in the last 20 years, everything that will undoubtedly happen during the next 20, how does Sevastopol deal with the growth pressures and the use conflicts? What role does tourism play? All of you are aware there's a lot of benefit from tourism, and there's some costs associated with tourism. Natural resources protection. To what degree will this community take a stand in protecting Lake Michigan or preserving Green Bay or preserving the lakes and streams that flow through the community? The Niagara Escarpment, many would argue an internationally significant geologic formation. To what degree does this community want to protect that or develop it, utilize it as a development resource? People would probably like to buy homes on the escarpment, buy homes near the escarpment. Again, agriculture. To what degree do you want to preserve farming? How does this community feel about large factory-oriented farms or large-scale farming operations? Is this something you want to encourage or something you want to discourage? What are the historical and cultural resources in Sevastopol? And as I may have mentioned the last time, these resources are yours to define. They don't necessarily have to be structures that are eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. They can be whatever you want them to be. Barns, fence lines, significant architectural styles, places where the first European settlers settled in Sevastopol. Your decision in terms of what those are. And we're going to talk about that tonight when we go through the exercise. Transportation systems. What kind of transportation system, aside from the spaceports and the Amtrak link, do you see in the future of Sevastopol? Bicycle trails, public transit, etc. So before we get into that, before we go into the vision exercise itself, what I wanted to do is provide you with some basic demographic data. If we know that the population is going to explode in the next 20 years, that will probably change how you respond to the question regarding housing. If you feel that we have enough houses, we don't want any more housing in the community, doggone it, that's it, and you're going to experience 25, 35, 45% population growth in the next 20 years, well, there's a bit of a discrepancy there. So when it comes to demographics, some of the basics. Between 1980 and 2005, the town of Sevastopol grew by a little less than 10%, around 9.2. That was consistent with most of the communities in Door County. The huge example is the town of Egg Harbor. I mean, the town of Egg Harbor grew significantly in that 25-year time span. Door County as a county grew by about 16%. You see that one community, the town of Nassawapi, actually declined in population between 1980 and 2005. In terms of population projections, these are from the Wisconsin Department of Administration. The DOA develops their population projections based upon formulae that include a variety of factors: historic population trends, economic trends at the local, national, regional, and national level, sociological trends. I assume most people are familiar with the term snowbird. It's either a really cool ski hill in Utah, or it's a term describing people who retire from winter states and move to less winter states. In the last 5 to 10 years, that trend is reversing. A lot of those people who typically moved from Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan to Florida, Arizona, Texas are deciding to move back here and stay here year-round. And that's going to play a significant role in determining the future of many communities. So the DOA formula is based upon a variety of factors, but there's one caveat, and that is the DOA formula are notoriously conservative. They will tend to underestimate growth more than they will overestimate growth. So it's quite likely, or more likely, that the population in a community will be larger than projected 20 years down the road. And when you think about what's happening and what's happened over the last 20 years, I'm not sure how many building permits you do on an average year, but I would suspect 2% growth, in this case the growth of 55 people, 55 people over 20 years, I suspect that's low. I think Sevastopol is going to grow by more than 55 people in the next 2 decades. But anyways, you'll see the population expectations for the other communities as well. When you get in, yes sir?
Your population estimates are strictly based on people that live here, so your building permits doesn't relate to or attempt to relate to what might be happening with the seasonal aspect. Correct? Very true.
That's the wild card here too, in a tourist community, or in a community that's so affected by tourism, where you have so many people whose residence in Sevastopol is their second residence, their tertiary residence.
Is there any way to get at that number?
Unfortunately,
based on anything?
Unfortunately, not based upon census data, but the way that you would look at it is through building permits and through tax parcel data. You'd want to look at tax parcel data in, let's say, 5-year increments going back 20 years, see what the trend looks like. In other words, is it trending like this, or is it trending like that? And that's something we'll talk about when we get to the housing chapter and the economic development chapter. We'll get into detail on what has happened at the local level over the last 10, 15, 20 years, or further back if you have data going further back. Unfortunately, census data, I may have mentioned this at the last meeting, census data is limited to a person's primary residence. When you fill out your census form, you don't get to fill one out for your Green Bay residents and your Sevastopol residents, or your Chicago residents and your Sevastopol residents. You can only fill it out for your primary residents. Excellent question, though. Some other interesting information. With that, with the growth in population, it was 4.5% from 1990 to 2000. The age group under 5 and school-age children actually declined during that time period. So you had a slight or moderate growth in overall population, but a pretty significant growth in population of residents under 5. I mean, a third less than you had in 1990. Equally significantly, I think, is the growth in the retirement age population. So an additional 1/5 of the 1990 population of 65 and over lives in Sevastopol or identifies Sevastopol as their primary residence in 2000. And it goes back to that baby boom bulge that I was talking about at our last meeting. That baby boom bulge, that huge segment of the American population that is aging, is going to play a significant role in determining the future of the country, but the future of the country at the local level as well. In terms of housing, in 1990, there were 926 households in Sevastopol. 10 years later, there were 1,076, a 16.2% increase. That's not a huge increase, but you do notice that it's quite a bit larger than the actual population growth, even when you account for the number of people in a household. So remember, it was 4.5% population growth in that 10-year period, yet 16.2% in households. Now, the population per household now in 2000 was 2.48 people, and 2.5 people per household. Now, that's dropped quite a bit. Why is that significant? Well, even if your population is going to stay the same over the next 10, 20, 30 years, if your household size is decreasing and your population is staying the same, you need more housing units. Does that make sense? If you have a smaller number of people, a fixed number of people with more people in each household, let's say 5 people in every 100 households have people in them. If you change the average number of people in a household to 3, you're going to need more than the 20 houses that fit the first bill. So,
could you define housing units compared to total households? What's the difference?
A household is the people. A housing unit is the structure. So a household is defined as, well, a household can be one person. 43-year-old single land use planners are a household. A family of 7 or 12 is a household. A retired couple, a household. So a household is defined as is the people that live in a unit. The housing unit is the actual structure. It could be a rental, it could be homeowner or land owner-occupied. As I said, in terms of housing units have grown by 8.9% over the past 10 years, almost 9%. So I would suspect that the number of housing units in the next 20 years will increase in a greater amount when compared to the number of people, because of the outside primary residence people building a home, a second home, or a vacation home in the town of Sevastopol. In the terms of housing value, some huge changes, and I'm sure those of you who live here are quite aware of that. The median value went from just over $80,000 10 years ago, nearly doubling to $156,000 in 2000. A 58% decrease in the number of homes in the community valued at less than $100,000, and a 1,262% increase in housing valued between $300,000 and $500,000. Again, those of you who live here perhaps aren't quite as shocked by these numbers. You'd probably expect it, but that's a significant number. Yes, ma'am.
When you say housing value, is that the value of the improvement excluding the land value, or is that land and improvements?
It's the value of the home.
The improvement.
When you fill out the census data, it doesn't include the value of the property that the home is sitting on. In terms of enrollment, Between 1990 and 2000, you have increased enrollment in kindergarten and pre-K. A slight decrease in elementary and high school. It's pretty much staying consistent. College and grad school enrollment levels have declined quite a bit. And that is going to be something interesting to follow. My question, of course, is why is that? And we'll get into that when we get into the guts of the comprehensive plan. In terms of educational attainment, you have a decrease in the number of people without a high school diploma, which is good. It's an indication that a greater percentage of your population has achieved a minimum of high school diploma. A significant increase in terms of people who've completed an associate's degree, a 2-year associate's degree. Slight decrease in bachelor's degree, huge increase in graduate degree. So as a whole, this community is becoming more highly educated. In terms of employment, between 1990 and 2000, unemployment has increased quite a bit. And when you think about the 1990, the economy in the 1990s was quite a bit better than it was in 2000. Now, it's since rebounded, and I would guess if we could do a 2006 survey, we'd find that that number has actually dropped. There's probably less than 66 unemployed people here. An interesting number is the number of people not in the labor force. It's kind of a vague category. It includes people who are not old enough to work. It includes people who've retired. But it also includes people who are no longer actively seeking work. And in some cases, a significant percentage of those people are people who have just gotten fed up. They can't find a job. They're done. I'm tired of looking, and that number has increased. Your numbers here are actually quite a bit lower than they are closer to urban areas. So in Green Bay and the surrounding suburbs, the percentage unemployment increase from 1990 to 2000 was quite a bit higher than this. But still, you're talking about a relatively, even though the 37.5% increase is pretty significant, with a population of nearly 2,500 people, we're talking about 48 to 66. So the increase from what it was to what it is significant. Within the context of the greater population, probably less so. Unless, of course, you're one of those people who is unemployed and looking for work. Then it's very significant. In terms of occupation, probably the most noticeable change in the last 10 years was in farming and forestry. 68% decrease in the number of residents who are involved in farming or forestry as their primary source of income. The top one is management professional. I would venture to guess the school district. Who are the other large employers in the community? I would guess the school district's probably the biggest. The hospital, exactly. And that would be there. That's where you'd find all those people. Service occupations would be restaurants and house cleaning and things like that. Household income. For those who made less than $25,000, that number has increased, interestingly, and I would venture to guess, I suspect that that is directly related to tourism. That is a direct result of tourism, because it's one of the few communities where the population at the lowest income level has actually increased. And when you notice, when you get to $25,000 to $50,000, that number has decreased sharply, which would make sense. Somewhere between this group and this group, you transition from people who are working in the services industry and the tourism industry to people who are working in a more permanent or fixed sector. And then huge increases in terms of people between 50 and 100,000, 100 to 200,000. And in 1990, people making 200,000 or more, there were none as reported on the census forms in the town of Sevastopol. 10 years later, there are 33. Median household income, again, increased quite a bit from 32,188 to 47,227. Does everybody, without getting into mathematics and statistics, does everybody understand the difference between median and mean? Mean being average. So I don't have to explain that? Explain it for us. Okay. Mean, M-E-A-N, or average income would be to take all the population of the town of Sevastopol, add up each one of their individual incomes, throw it in a pot, total it, and divide it by the number of residents. So if you had 100 residents making $10 each, $1,000 divide, so that's basic averaging. Median is different. Median, you lay out, if you imagine a line of every single resident in the town of Sevastopol standing in line, and on my right, your left, is the person who makes the least amount of money, and on the far left, or your far right, is the person who makes the most amount of money. If I take the least and the most out, and the least and the most out, and I keep on doing that, eventually I hit the person who's in the middle. That's the median. And median will almost always be lower than mean or average. So the average income in Sevastopol is probably quite a bit higher than $47,000. And that makes sense because there could be someone who makes $10 million a year. Probably not in this meeting. If you are, let's talk. But that would statistically skew the average way up higher. That's why median is more important demographically than mean. Hated statistics when I was in college. Hated it. So, what's that? Good point. So what do we have? What can we assume based upon a brief discussion of the basic demographic data? Well, the population is growing, but it's growing slowly. It has grown slowly in the past 25 years. It's anticipated to grow slowly during the next 20. With that asterisk, Jeff's asterisk, and that is, there's no way you're going to grow at 2%. I mean, I would bet a lot that your growth over the next 20 years is going to far exceed 2%. Double, triple, quadruple that number. We'll see, time will tell. But that's what the DOA population projection is right now. School-age residents are declining while retirement-age residents are growing quite considerably. Total households have increased while average household size has decreased. Total housing units have increased by 127 between 1990 and 2000. And as you probably all know, again, the price of housing up here has gone up. It's, it's the challenge of Door County, affordable housing and such. And it's becoming this community is becoming a more highly educated community. The number of people employed and unemployed in the workforce increased between 1990 and 2000. So you had a slight increase in the number of unemployed, but a pretty considerable increase in the number of people who are employed. And then median household income grew almost by half in the same time period. So does anybody have any questions about the demographics? Yes, ma'am?
So anyway, can you go back to the slide that showed the unemployed versus the employed or labor force? Those numbers to me on 2000, if you add those up, those are more than our population, so how can that be?
Which ones are you adding up?
Am I looking at that right? So I should just be adding, in labor force, 1,700 of that?
17 plus 6.
That is these two added together.
Oh.
So 1,700 includes 1,404 employed, 66 unemployed. These people are outside of this group. So these people are not in the labor force. Well,
Or retirees.
I think I may have said something in error before. Let me correct it. Not in the labor force is I will answer this with certainty at the next one, but I'm going to give it a go right now, and I may be wrong, and I'll certainly clarify it next time. Not in the labor force are people who are eligible to work, are able to work, but have chosen not to pursue work. They're not kids, they're not children. So this number right here are people who are able to work, but for a variety of reasons are no longer seeking work. They are not unemployed. Unemployed, in terms of census data, are people who are not working but are actively seeking employment. That's the difference between those two. And I'll confirm that. Eric's over here nodding, and since he was in school less long ago than I was, I'm going to kind of assume that I'm close to being right on that. But does that answer your question? So I think if you add 1,700 and 720, you get closer. Any other questions? regarding demographics? I know it's a sexy topic.
How about self-employed? Is that accounted for at all?
It is in the detailed breakdown. And if there is a significant, I'll leave the definition of what significant is for us when we get into this process. But if there's a significant percentage of self-employed people in Sevastopol, we'll go deeper into the census data. I mean, you've filled out the census forms, I'm sure. If you're thinking, wow, that topic Jeff talked about last night was interesting, you can go home, go online and click U.S. Census data, and you can bring up just reams, volumes of information. And it's always a question of how deep we want to wade into that information. It's different for every community. Any other questions? Anybody need a cookie or a soda or something before we get going? Because my friend Eric would be glad to deliver. All right. Well, what we're going to do now is basically get into the purpose of this meeting. We're going to go through something called a vision exercise. So I go back to what I said before. Be visionary, not practical. Visionary! Think about your dreams, your desires, your goals, what you would like to see most for this community over the next 20 years, the challenges that you want addressed, the opportunities that you want achieved. Think about the past in terms of what cultural resources or historic resources you feel are absolutely critical in terms of being preserved for future generations. Unless, of course, you don't care about that and you want to turn away from the past, and this is your goal, your vision. So be visionary. If you have any questions, Jeff, is this visionary enough? Odds are it's not visionary enough. Be more visionary. Don't be constrained by practical things. Now, that said, if you really, really want me to put spaceports in your plan, I'll do it, but it's not very likely. So what we're going to do is put up a series of sentences on the screen here. And I'll put it up, and I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it. You should have some blank paper in front of you and some pens. If you don't, raise your hand, and Eric will make sure you have some. What I'd like you to do is think about how you would finish that sentence. No constraints. So if we're talking about transportation or whatever, just think about the things that you would see, your vision within the context of the question that is up here for the year 2026. And again, think about your ideal future for this community, the dreams that you have for Sevastopol during the next 5, 10, 20 years. And again, I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it, write it down, and I'm going to ask you to start talking. Make Laddie follow you on film. So, in the year 2026, remember, we've teleported, pneumatic tubed, time warped into the future, 2026. In Sevastopol in 2026, attractive and desirable housing includes whatever you think it includes. What? This is your turn to participate. Feel free to raise your hand or just shout out.
Well,
Examples.
I was looking at viewing it from the aesthetics and just the aesthetics. And I put down that homes that complement and blend in with the landscape and the rural character that is still sustained in the township.
So, complement landscape.
And blend in with the landscape and the rural character that's still sustained in the township.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Housing that is clustered on smaller lots to preserve open spaces in other areas.
So small, say the first part.
Housing that is clustered on smaller lots to preserve open spaces in other areas.
Excellent. Next.
Affordable housing in planned areas.
How would you define affordable housing? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but would that include, is that affordable owner occupied or affordable rental or both?
Affordable owner occupied.
Something young people can afford so they can stay in the township.
Next.
Energy efficient housing?
And others?
Space for aging population that includes personal and medical assistance when needed with proximity to multi-ages.
Forgive me, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but space for aging population in proximity to?
Not just elderly, but variety of ages of people.
Okay. I'm going to call it diverse aged housing. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Housing that is well maintained, clean of junk, litter, and debris. And
Boy,
underground utility lines.
2026, we have a lot of cars in some of these markets.
What was the last part? Around?
Underground utility lines.
Underground utility lines. I tell you what, I'm going to sneak that over into another section if you don't mind. It'll be up here, but I'm going to put it under services. We'll be talking about this in a moment. Other housing. Yes, sir.
I have one that doesn't, I'm not sure quite makes sense, but I'm tired of seeing $1 million homes on the smallest available parcel in the world.
Size restraint.
In other words, yeah, it's like, you know, somebody buys a 65-foot lot and builds a 60-foot house on it. I mean, you know, that's not right, but they have a 100-foot lot and they.
So is it, I'm sorry.
It's just too much house for the land. I don't know.
Is it the value of the house on a small or the size of the house?
Size.
Okay.
I got too many mausoleums and funeral homes built on too small a lot.
All right.
How many people are dead, so it doesn't
Did it happen on Park Road, Dan?
Not on Park Road at all.
We only have two.
Otherwise, we could have more mobile homes. In which case, we don't like them, we can move them. So, I mean, that's
Attractive and desirable housing. Others. Yes, sir.
Primarily single family on 1 to 20 acre lots with multifamily opportunities within a mile of the school or the highway corridor to increase the tax base and keep more.
I don't write that fast. So, primarily single family on large. Did you say
1 to 20 acre lots?
1 to 20?
Yeah, of the range. Multifamily near the school and highway corridor.
Got it. Others? Sir.
Street setbacks and landscape screening standards for major highway corridors.
What was the first one? I got the landscape standards for highway corridors.
Setbacks.
And you wanted small ones, big ones?
Well, adequate setbacks and landscape standards to mitigate.
Got it.
Mitigate the impact of the other.
More. Others? Yes, sir.
My vision for 26 is the development of town of Sevastopol into the land of lakes and we'll develop new lakes and new bays, and then we can build all these houses around those lakes, and I don't know where you're going to put that. But
I'm going to put it right here.
And the reason being that they have a better tax structure.
And then you said housing around lakes?
Yep.
You want to put another board in or take another board?
You can leave it just as it is.
We could make less or more lakes.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about brand new lakes and all unused farmland.
Good idea.
Reason being, the taxes on Clark Lake are getting up there, and
He wants us to share with.
in 1958, we paid $9 a foot for water frontage, and the recent tax land value went to $3,120 a foot. So if we get more water, we can, you know,
More money?
Get more money.
get more money in for taxes.
If raising the tax base is really the reason for this, then maybe we should build condos around the lake, solid condos around the lake. That would raise tax base too.
Right now I'm trying to decide whether that was a proposal
That's
or
visionary.
a sarcastic suggestion. Well, that's something that when we get into the housing chapter, when we get into economic development, when we get into utilities and community facilities, we're going to talk about ways of improving, enhancing, increasing the tax base. And that condominium development is one potential option. And we'll talk about a variety of them. 1 second. Yes, sir.
I think our housing should still include farm estates.
Farm estates.
Farm estates. We have small farm estates all over this Sevastopol.
How would you define a farm estate? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to make sure what I'm thinking when I write the chapter is what.
Well, when you drive around the community, you see farms. You see farmhouses with barns, and those farms that are still active. For example, the Henschel farm. It really looks nice, you know, the house, the barn. I think that's part of the character of Sevastopol, and I think that needs to be preserved. And so it's going to go across housing and farming, but
Well, it's going to pop up in one or two other places too.
what I wouldn't want to see is all of a sudden these nice farm estates that are out there.
Being
You know, Charlie Jarman's place, those kind of places. You don't want all of a sudden to see those places disappear.
right.
I think they should still be here in 2026.
Please make a mental note to bring that subject up again. We're going to be talking about that some more. Sir, you had another?
I don't know if it's a land use issue or a housing issue, but could be either one, but there should be some consideration of public/private open space corridors in conjunction with housing development.
Yeah, and it kind of comes back to clustered on small lots, preserving open space that was brought up earlier. So when you said open space corridors, public and private? Are there other examples of desirable housing?
I got one, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
Housing that embraces the infrastructure of the future by way of services, technology, and transportation.
All right, let's see if we can condense that. What are you trying to say exactly? I mean, I know what you said, but you want technology?
Well, if we're looking to 2026, we're going to have to address on how people are going to be living and making their incomes is going to determine how they're going to live.
Correct.
You know.
2026 technology. Is technology okay, Leaf? Is that? Embraces 2026 technology. In other words, houses that are based upon whatever the technology, whatever the. Okay.
The Jetsons.
Da, 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 da. Oh, that's the Simpsons.
Put it up there.
Yes,
Water
ma'am.
over the dish.
Do you have rental and leasing options up there? I can't see.
Not yet. So is that something you want? Rental leasing as an option?
Apart from owning.
You can't. You can't.
It brings up a good point. Keep in mind, as we go through these various categories, if it's not up here, it's not going to appear in that first draft. Now, that doesn't mean that if you forget to say something tonight, it's not going to be in the plan. What it does mean is when I start writing chapter 4, I'm going to look at your SWOT exercise responses, your values responses, demographics, etc. And I'm going to look at this. And based upon the feedback that I've received, that information is going to flavor the chapter that I draft. So when we get into, I don't know, what things that you want to preserve, if you don't tell me that trees are something you want to preserve, I'm not going to be writing a chapter that focuses on preserving trees. Now, maybe you don't want trees to be preserved, then don't tell me that. But that, I want to make my point. Get it up here on the board and make sure it gets in the chapter. Yes, sir?
I don't know if there's one up there, but I would call it owner occupied. Less timeshares.
Less timeshares.
Maybe owner occupied is a better way for that, I don't know, but.
Well, it's actually, owner occupied is up here, and I think, it's under affordable housing. So, right, it's under affordable. So you'd want the dominant housing, the predominant?
Bothers me personally is all the timeshare properties where people buy it as an investment and rent it to everybody under the sun and never use the facility. Right. And therefore what you end up with is a transient group of people. It may be great for tourism, but I don't think it's great for Sevastopol.
I'll put them both up there. So we have more owner occupied and less timeshare. Are there any more attractive and desirable housing, or would you like to move on to the next one? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know quite how to say this either, and maybe it's up there.
So we'll figure it out.
Identify those natural, cultural, historical, precious entities that we have now, so that by 2026, they're still here. Obviously.
We will be getting to that, and since I'm not sure which one of those last three it goes under, could you make a note on your sheet to bring that up when we get to the preserve? Because we'll be talking about what it is that you as a community want to preserve. Next, the transportation network in Sevastopol includes spaceports, or whatever else you'd like it to include. (2026), 20 years from now. Tell me what the
We're going to return to the gravel roads, restoring the rustic, rural character of the
So that the entirety of the town gets gravel. Forgive me, I don't mean this in a bad way, but is that
along with that, within the town perimeters, we'll go with horse and buggies. That'll solve our energy problem.
one way of
Establish an Amish community here. Get rid of all the farms.
How about bus service?
I'll give you this last warning. If you say it, I'm putting it up here.
Bus service.
Hold that thought 1 second, ma'am. I just want to make sure.
He's not serious.
No gravel.
Yes, he is.
You've seen our town budget, it may be a requirement.
That's what so gravel roads where? Primary collectors and.
Pothole, we'll just grind her out.
All right, I'm going to come back to you. Busing, say again.
Bus service for both local and out of town.
From and to where out of town?
Intra and inter.
Intra. Yes.
Right. The intra.
Nursing home.
Okay.
Well, sings in the nursing home. Maybe the hitch.
I'm thinking a lot.
Other parts of the transportation system.
I think you can include other kinds of things under that, like ride share, like taxi service, community supported, not just bus service, but something that's going to get people to where they want to get if they don't want to use personal transportation or can't. Public transportation. It's also big picture.
Got it.
How about park and ride?
Two communities in the last 2 years include hydrogen and things like that on their plan for the future. Yes, sir.
Electronic technology to 2026 standards.
Can you
So
say that one more
people
time?
don't have to go anyplace. They can do a lot of their business at home. Yeah.
He's thinking of working at home, possibility.
Charlie, you went to the grocery delivery truck?
I was going to bring that up on the services.
Mules on Wheels?
That's stupid.
There's about 3 or 4 places that can go. My inclination is to put it under economic because it.
Whatever.
Well, but I want to put it where you want it put, not where I'm thinking.
Well, I just explained my reason. I figured it could be under transportation and that many businesses do and can be conducted from their home if they have adequate computer, wireless or technology that it takes for it.
Telecommuting is the term that is usually used to describe it. But that's a way of, I think, avoiding the transportation system or minimizing the necessity of a transportation system. So
wherever.
Economic just because it's an alternative form of...
That's your job. Do it.
Jeff, I'd like to say more specifically, fiber to the home.
You'd like to say what?
Fiber to the home. You can't do telecommuting in 2026.
That's probably in services.
Even doing a little bit of services.
The other question is 20 years from now, are fiber optics going to be cutting edge or are they going to be horse and buggy with dinosaur?
Well, the best we know right now.
We need high-speed internet everywhere.
That's what I said.
Okay, I do have one request. Or I'm sorry, I have another request. These ideas are great. We want to make sure they're up there. If you could write them down, if they don't fit into transportation, just write them on your note sheet and make a note so you come back to them. But I want to follow up with what Laddie said a moment ago.
Well, no,
if we put
Jeff, what I said is fiber to the home. That includes TV, includes internet, includes future service. I haven't thought about it yet. It includes so many things, but it's got to be fiber or the nearest generation to it.
Right, and let me, does everybody understand when he says fiber, we're talking about fiber optic technology?
Yes.
Right now, it is at or near cutting edge. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it may be, right. So I guess my question is, do we want to actually name the specific high technology, or do we want to say the highest technology available?
High-speed communications would do it, but internet is too limiting.
Sounds like a brilliant idea.
What? What, Leah?
And it sounds like a brilliant thing.
Yes, it does.
Some cities should have that kind of service.
Yes, ma'am. We're certainly trying to get back there. We're back on transportation. Yes, ma'am.
Because whatever transportation we have, I would like it to be non-polluting by 2026.
Yes, ma'am.
How about roadways made up of a material, don't know if it exists, that causes snow not to build up? You never have to plow it.
Gravel.
Yeah, it builds up, I have gravel.
How would I say that? Snow-resistant roads.
No, there are heated driveways. You could say a heated road, but none of us can afford the tax to pay.
Hey, you're getting practical.
Yeah, you can't get practical.
Visionary.
Global warming, you'll have to.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about it.
Roads, how about roads designed to reduce snow buildup? Is that okay?
Jeff, I think something like refueling, whatever that means. Whether that would be electrical or hydrogen, I think there could be something where you could have a community that is a pioneer in having refueling capabilities for non-polluting vehicles. I mean, it would be great to have hydrogen here tomorrow, but there would be no place to refill your car.
Right.
So maybe that would be something you'd work towards. So you could have a community where you could get your hydrogen vehicle refilled or whatever it is.
Yep.
Or more hay for your horse, whatever.
Got it.
is.
1 second, sir. Yes, sir.
More rustic roads with slower speed limits.
Say that again?
More rustic roads
More rustic roads, slower speed
with
limits.
slower speed limits.
Are there rustic roads in the community right now?
Yes.
Designated rustic roads?
Yeah, hard road.
Excellent. Sir, you were next?
Well, one which is a compendium of a whole bunch of things, safe and attractive highway corridors, which could include control of billboards, control of driveways, landscape treatments, the whole compendium.
Is billboards part of that? Because I think that's an excellent point. Billboards.
Could be. It could be part of that. It could be part of nature. It could be part of economic, depending upon. Do you want more of them, less of them, none of them?
None of them unless I'm in Nessawac.
No billboards. Yes, sir.
Use of side road right-of-ways for any future bike trails or anything like that, rather than taking land through the middle or something like that.
Got it?
We do not want, I don't think, we want 4-lane highways in Sevastopol. But we may have to consider, don't throw me out here for saying this, we may have to consider doing a 4-lane to the Mill Supper Club.
And then down to 2.
And then,
And then she goes to 2-lane, period. I don't know if that needs to be said here, but that's still part of Sevastopol, and that's why I bring it up.
I'm not familiar with that issue. Or
The
that.
state is
Yep, I know where it splits.
building a 4-lane highway all the way to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. But when they get to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, the 4-lane highway has no outlet.
Right.
So, and we have huge discussions here about bridges and things and so forth, but somehow you need to bring and it comes over, once it crosses the bridge, it comes over out of Sturgeon Bay into Sevastopol.
Yep.
But a 4-lane coming up to the Mill Supper Club, which is where 57 goes to the east and 42 goes to the north, would be a natural intersection for that 4-lane to end and traffic to flow. eliminating the bottleneck that the state is creating in Sturgeon Bay, in my opinion.
Sure. Well, again, what we don't do is vote on what gets put up here or not.
Right.
Every one of you has the ability to say something that gets up here.
I just
So
think
I
it's
just want to
something
make.
that needs to be said because someday it's going to have to be dealt with.
Well, and let me go with this for a moment. The issue is, I'm assuming it is not your desire that from the bridge to that intersection becomes 4-lane just because you think it would be neat to be 4-lane as opposed to 2-lane. You see it as a solution to what you perceive or what is a problem, correct?
I see it as a solution to a future problem that's coming up.
Okay, my question is, do we want to put up here a presumed solution to a problem, or do we want to put the problem up here and not prescribe the solution yet? Does that make sense? Because what if there were another solution to this problem that didn't result in $20+ million for a new bridge, or however, I don't know, however much a bridge would cost, or widening it? Do you see where I'm getting? So my point is, one position, you just want 4 lanes to the intersection. Another position would be, we have some traffic issues that are going to get worse and worse and worse, and we need to address those.
Right. So we need to reduce the traffic congestion on the southern border of Sevastopol.
Got it.
I'm going to buy that junkyard and turn it into a parking lot.
Some weekends, probably lumber for it, cutting that stretch.
Yeah, I spent enough time up here to be familiar with that. There were others. I'll be back to you in a second. Yes, sir.
Oh, I'd like to see wider roads with shoulders on to ease some of the, you know,
Wider
all the
roads.
back roads are starting to get more tourists on them, more people looking at the scenery, and the equipment's getting wider, bigger. It's not going to get smaller. Give a little bit of room or space so someone
it.
ain't ending up in the ditch.
We could solve that by cutting down the scenery.
We're cutting down
One
dump
moment,
trucks.
ma'am.
I
Yes,
was
sir.
going to say ensure safe movement of agricultural equipment.
Ma'am?
I'd like to see more bicycle trails, but I don't know if that fits under transportation.
Depends.
Well,
We can put it under both or either. There are typically 2 kinds of bicycle facilities out there. One is like the Anape Trail or bike trails up in Schwamigan National Park or the Kettle. Those are recreational trails. Those are places where you go with a bike to ride it to enjoy nature. Transportation systems for bicycles mean being able to safely get from wherever you live to wherever you work to wherever you play and to wherever you shop on a bike. So they're in this section from transportation for bikes, we'd be talking about safely being able to use your bike as your primary or a significant form of transportation. If you're interested in being able to take the mountain bike and the kids and go have fun someplace, that would probably go under recreation. That's what I was getting at. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I'd like to preserve, the only public transportation we have now is the school bus. And I would like to preserve that. I'd like to preserve the school. So one of the things that might do that would be to have pickup areas that parents can safely drop their children off so that the school bus will be able to pick them up. Because I think that the busing from house to house will not be available in 2026.
Got it. Hey. Here we go. Sevastopol provides a variety of services to residents, including write it down for now.
There's some way of providing transportation.
So are you talking about public transportation, public transit?
Public transportation or some form
And
of transportation
two
that
economic
is
centers?
accessible and affordable. So make it accessible and affordable.
If I could add that little bus service that says service to Green Bay and Milwaukee, and it's kind of building on what Jane said, actually going up north.
Right, I agree.
Just up the peninsula.
Within the county, it's within the county and out.
So it could be on either one.
It could be in or intra.
North and south, not east.
I'm confused by the statement. You want the variety of services to residents in 2026, not what we provide now.
Correct.
Because it says Sevastopol provides a variety.
In 2026, Sevastopol provides, remember, we're not in 2006 right now. We've transmutated until...
Are you ready for him already?
I am ready for him when you are. Fire away.
Service is gonna be some kind of a hovercraft that goes over the roads and just melts the snow.
A Hoovercraft.
Oh, what do you call it? Hovercraft? I don't know what the heck you call it, you know, it's gonna be
Hoover's a
bigger.
bag.
So you want,
Well, maybe it'll work as sucking it up.
so instead of plowing the snow out of the...
Plowing it, it's got a big heat system on it
So
that
it's
will melt the
melting.
snow. But it'll be built in America by Americans.
For twice.
American made.
American made, no Japanese. Well, 2026 they could do that.
Is it past your bedtime, Tony?
Could, getting pretty close.
American made road snow melter.
Bring back the,
Door County, Maine.
Better start budgeting for that now. Yes, sir.
A community center.
I don't think I've ever been involved in a planning process where this did not pop up here.
I mean, it could be a combination town hall, community center, or something, but something along those lines.
Auditorium. Part of it, that's been suggested.
We have a lake. We have the lakes.
Sir.
Sewage treatment? Combined sewage treatment.
We are going to be discussing this a lot in the future, wastewater treatment. So it's up there now, but when I say that, is there something, when you're talking about like a municipal sewage treatment, the reason I'm questioning you on this is if there are alternatives out there to a combined sewage treatment or wastewater treatment facility that are less expensive, more effective, and better for the environment, would you still want a typical municipal wastewater treatment facility?
Well, I think it has, the principle behind it is combined and not individual.
Good, but I guess that's what, so sewage treatment combined. Is that okay? I just asked that because, again, it comes back to kind of the road intersection situation. What is the problem? And if there's alternative solutions to that problem, what do you want those alternatives included? Yes, ma'am.
Public lake access.
Public
Water
lake
access. Public water access.
Boat launch. Whitefish Bay.
Gotta find someone to fix it.
Sir?
Adequate fire protection.
Adequate fire?
Yeah.
What about other public safety?
Right now, we don't have adequate fire protection in the north part of town of Sevastopol. That's something we have to, you know, if that comes with public safety, well, right now county provides.
Do you see the town having
The
its
town needs to have their
own
own
public
fire
safety?
protection. Public safety, yeah.
Okay.
Mainly,
Well, keep in mind, we're talking 20 years in the future. Yes, ma'am.
Town-wide trash service elimination.
So are you talking about pickup, curbside pickup or something like that? Or are you
Whatever
talking
is
about?
State-of-the-art plan, but yeah, getting rid of our individual household.
That's what I meant. Is it you want it taken from the house and dealt with, or are you talking?
You want to check out your house or?
You can come clean it and pick it up and take it away. Dusting.
Well, who knows? We may have some sort of fuel burner, incinerator, generator thing that you don't want to get rid of your garbage. You want all your neighbors' garbage to fuel. Yes, sir.
Combine multiple recycling centers.
You want it, but you don't want it next to your home.
Other services, if any. Yes, sir.
The ability to move farm products to market efficiently.
Okay, there's a capability, or I mean, do you want the town to be providing that service?
Well, they maintain roads in such a condition and width that we can move the stuff to the large trucks that are getting larger, Jason said all the time, that we can move the large trucks through onto the highway and that so that it can be done rather than narrowing them up and making the roads more crooked and
Got it.
dropping the speed limit. Yeah.
Ma'am?
Central water source, you know, like combined.
So right now, everybody's on private wells, I assume? That's okay, so community well? Is that?
Same.
Good point, laddie. Yes, sir.
Is this where we cover things like wind generators?
Sure. I mean, you could, yes. Do you want the town to provide or incentives for, or distance? Tell me more.
We're talking 2026, so self-generated energy, alternative energy.
Non-polluting, so.
We want those bolts coming in.
A windmill in every bank. Solar panels and windmills.
Did you put up a big wall to keep all that nasty stuff from down?
See, that's one of those things where we get back to that visionary versus practical. 20 years from now, I think solar collection is going to be light years ahead of where we are right now. We will have moved beyond photovoltaic to some technology that's just absolutely amazing. So that's one of the nice things about talking about self-generating, alternative energy, non-polluting, as opposed to talking about specific things. That makes sense. Because who knows what else might be available 20 years from now. Yes, ma'am.
It goes with some of the others that are out there about a safe water supply.
Community water source, safe. Yes, sir.
I'd say keep septic disposal and water supply actually private, so that we're not all broke by 2026.
Private wastewater treatment.
The only one here that's still relevant.
And what was that? Why did you want that?
Cost and tax standpoint.
So private doesn't necessarily mean individual landowners, it could mean developers, for instance.
Added educational opportunities for adults in Sevastopol.
Ma'am?
I was just thinking, we're going to be so advanced that people might want to try something like a community garden plot. Oh, remember how they used to do it?
That's what we'll do with our waste, we'll put it in the community garbage plot.
Arlene will go over and farm Charlie's lot.
Were there other services? Why don't we take 5 minutes, or do you want 10?
5.
5? 5. Take 5 minutes. Be back here. Right now I have a 25 to. Be back here in 5 minutes. We'll run through the last ones. Get out of here in about, well, we'll be out of here before 10, some around 9:30-ish, give or take. Can you hear me okay? All right. Farming. Is there any? If there is, what's it like?
Continues.
Farming continues. Continues to be what? A part of the landscape? A part of the economy?
Yes, both. So your orchards continue, your dairy farms continue, the cornfields continue.
Yes, ma'am.
No large corporate farms because of the rock base?
No large, does not include large farms?
No, large corporate type.
What's the term for those? What's a large farm? Huge.
CAFOs are typically
What's a large farm?
but
What do you classify large?
that's
You know,
right.
Is it 5 family members having 1,000 cows, or is
That's
it
where I'm
one
going.
person
But
and
it's
these
up
large
to-
farms. If they'd have digesters to produce their own electricity, they take care of your manure systems, they take care of your.
We have a impassioned. Hold that thought. Is your concern ecological, environmental, or is it?
Yes.
Okay, so if you could have a farm of any size, whether it be 2 cows or 2,000 cows, that did not negatively affect the environment. In other words, that for a variety of reasons then would you be okay? I'm sorry?
That would be terrific.
Okay, so, and that's what I'm getting at. So,
And the water supply.
so farming that does not negatively affect the environment or the water supply. Is that okay? Please believe me, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. What I'm trying to do is get to the core of your opposition. On the other hand, if you are opposed to large farms for philosophical reasons, for whatever, I'll put it up here. I just want to make sure if that's what I wanted to get at. So, bear with me. I got your back, yo.
I think these, like I said, large farms have digesters on them. You know, they'll be producing their own electricity. That's something, by then, that should be not a problem.
They can even produce energy that they can sell.
Mm-hmm.
It's less expensive than what we pay now.
Electricity is energy. Electricity is energy.
Adequate land base to maintain a profitable farm or operating farm.
Next. Others.
Limitation on confinement buildings.
Say that again.
Limitation on confinement buildings.
Limitation in what way?
Well, for one thing, there's an odor problem, there's a disposal problem, and from the standpoint of raising the animals in a confinement building.
So, right, so a limitation meaning you can only have 10 of them, you can only have 100 of them, you can have none?
Some consideration of the problem.
Okay. Others? Farming? Sir?
Cropland may be part of the open space corridors, set aside for highway setbacks or developments.
Others?
Nutrient management incentives. Land nutrient management incentives.
Okay, I have a question. We've talking? We've talking? I gotta pay that.
Nutrient loading of agricultural land.
We've talked a lot about specifics, but we haven't talked about big picture at all. I mean, what is farming like in 2026? Is it dairy? Is it crop? Is it cash crop? Is it organic? Is it heirloom? Is it flowers? Is it orchards? Is it, sir?
It's going to be pretty hard to plan that ahead because economics will take care of that planning for you.
That is true to a great degree. However, you can plan and prepare based upon what you know and what you can. Instead, let me say it this way. If it is the goal of this community to maintain economically viable, family-sized or moderately sized, defined as a couple hundred cows at most, dairy operations into the future, I absolutely assure you that it is not going to happen. It is not going to work. As much as it's part of our cultural history, it is not going to work. On the other hand, there are ways that dairy farms of that size can work. One way is to go completely organic. I'm not advocating or recommending this. I'm saying there are ways in which it can happen. If you are going to dairy farm the way dairy farming has always occurred in Wisconsin's past, I guarantee you're going to be out of business in the not too distant future because it's becoming impossible to compete with the California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, all the desert dairy farms. But if you want farming...
I don't know how you can really say that.
I just did.
Well, now you've taken our plan and made it your plan.
No, I'm not recommending that. What I'm saying is a matter of... I can say this as a matter of fact. It is over the coming years, the odds on a small dairy farm operation, and I would define that as anywhere maybe up to including a couple hundred cows. It's the ability of that farm to compete economically with farming as it is evolving is almost non-existent. I will stand on that, and I didn't write this. I didn't draft. I'm looking at the trends.
The same words you're speaking were spoken 40 years ago.
You're absolutely right.
And those farmers are still out there. Those
You're
small
absolutely
farms
right.
are still out there.
The state of Wisconsin every year puts out an inventory of the number of dairy farms and number of farming operations at various sizes. During the Dust Bowl, we didn't lose near the number of farms that we've lost in the last 5 or 10 years. It is going away. It is going away faster than it has ever gone away in the history of the state of Wisconsin. Other states that are maybe 5 or 10 years further down the road than this state is, that have had to deal with it, had to deal with these challenges, Vermont, New Hampshire, and a couple other places, have found that the best way for that sized operation to succeed is to convert to an alternative style of farming, whether it be organic or whether it be heirloom vegetables or something else. But standing toe-to-toe with the big farm operations is a losing proposition. I'm not telling you what you should put in here. That part I'm not planning for you. That's a matter of fact. Looking at the numbers statewide, in the region, and nationally, it looks so far beyond dire.
I still think, though, that for Sevastopol, just in my opinion, in Sevastopol, we should strive to still have dairy farms, cherry orchards, apple orchards. I think 20 years from now, it would be nice if that could still be part of our landscape.
And it absolutely.
I don't think we can say whether they're going to be organic or not organic, because now you're beginning to walk into that, what is technology going to be 20 years from now?
You're absolutely right. That was my point, though.
That goes right back to what we were talking about earlier.
I agree with you on that.
I'll say that if farming exists, if it is present, it will embrace change, or it will not be here.
Yes, ma'am.
Family businesses built on like niche farming, like as you mentioned, heirlooms or flowers or seeds or different varieties. Restaurants even, as in New England, are based on like one single thread.
Yep. Sir.
I think Sevastopol will have to provide some sort of tax incentive or something to keep land in farming for the people moving up here. If they buy land, you know, some sort of incentive to not put trees on it.
Again, we can come back to this if yes, ma'am.
Development rights, which enables a person to keep the farm.
Talking about purchase of development rights, transfer of development rights.
Transfer and purchase.
They're called PDRs and TDRs, and they are very effective at preserving natural space and ag land, but they can be kind of expensive. And really the only place in Wisconsin that's done it thus far is the town of Dunn. They've done it very, very well, very effectively. The town of Dunn, I think it's now the village of Dunn, Madison. Just very recently started. I was up in Ashland for most of last year working up there, so they're working on it too. PDRs and TDRs have tons of promise, but up until very recently there were lots of legal hurdles.
Would sustainable farming be, and that could mean anything.
Yep. Well, if you want farming to be here, by rights it would have to be sustainable. It would have to sustain itself too then.
We do that every day. Practice sustainable farming.
And there's two ways of defining sustainable farming. One would be, if farming is still here in 2026, farming has sustained itself over 20 years, so it's sustainable. The ecological, natural step version of sustainable farming would be farming that utilizes no pesticides, no herbicides, no hormones, or it's done naturally. So without defining it, that's what's up there right now. It could be interpreted both ways. The next one, the natural environment of Sevastopol. Includes is, was, whatever you'd like. Feel free to take a moment to think about that. Yes, sir.
Right to farm. I don't know where it comes under, but that's something that you've got to be constantly aware of, is having the right to farm and the right to farm without undue harassment.
Who's harassing you?
Community parks.
Define the park. Nature preserves or recreation. Either one's good, but I just want to make sure I put it in the right place. Are you talking about? Others, nature.
We have a state park, does that need to be in that?
You tell me. So Whitefish Dunes is still. Ma'am.
What about protecting our water, our scenic water, both visually and substance-wise? First of all, you don't have the vision of it because of housing built boom, boom, boom next to each other, and then housing that are built there don't have proper sewage, updated sewage. And pollute the water.
I just put protect water quality and views of water. I assume the views you're talking about are being able to see Lake Michigan, being able to see Lower Green Bay.
We're also talking, I think we may also be talking about groundwater.
Right, when I said protect water quality, I haven't limited it to ground or surface. It would be all.
Okay.
And that's kind of a misconception, as many of you who live up here in karst geology probably know. There really is no difference between groundwater and surface water. It's the same thing. Yes, ma'am.
Retain animal habitats.
Deer hunting.
You're gonna run into a cat's garden. Turkeys.
No deer.
So again, think about the community now. Think about 20 years from now. What about today's landscape do you want to make sure is still there in 20 years?
Needing public access to natural bodies of water.
More? Others?
Preserve threatened and endangered plants.
Just plants? To heck with those animals, we'll just protect the plants.
Well, flora and fauna.
Ooh, nice choice of words.
What about proper wildlife
I knew fauna.
management?
Hold that thought for 1 second, please, ma'am. I was trading barbs with Laddie. What was that?
Wildlife management, so we don't have excessive turkeys and deer.
So what? Good wildlife management? Bad, poor wildlife?
What, sustain, but managed so it's not overly populated or done
Okay.
away with.
I'll go with good. Yes, ma'am.
Manage invasive species.
To have more of them, less of them?
Control.
So invasive species have been controlled, are controlled, are
Eliminated.
it's a nice desire. Others?
Preserve wetlands.
And still more? Yes? No?
Preserve significant, geologically significant areas like the Niagara Escarpment and wooded areas.
Yes, sir.
What critical natural resource areas are necessary to preserve the character of the town?
Say that again. I didn't catch all that.
What critical natural resource areas are necessary to be preserved to maintain the character of the town?
Is that a question for me, or?
No, it's not. It's a charge. Or put it in a different context. We need to identify
There you go.
critical natural resource areas to maintain.
Thank you. So I'm kind of narrowly focused. You take me off my track and I lose the ability to communicate. Identify critical resource areas. Is that? Ma'am?
Also, noise pollution, we talk about development, so that whatever we develop doesn't create a noise pollution.
So reduced noise pollution, eliminated noise pollution. What about noise pollution? Protect noise pollution? Don't harm the noise pollution.
Avoid.
Avoid.
Yeah, thank you.
I didn't catch that last one. What was that?
Light.
Get rid of light bulbs. Back to candles. Well, they're gravel clothes and
Any others? Sevastopol has successfully preserved. Take a minute to think about that. It can be landscape, it can be structures, it can be way of life, it can be farming or certain kinds of jobs, whatever you want. Some facet or component of today's life in this community that you want to ensure is preserved 20 years down the road. You could take a moment and think about that. Oops.
Preserve our security.
Parks. Next.
A school system.
Got it?
Population diversity. I know it's not diverse.
And
I got a long one.
Sevastopol has successfully preserved and retained the historically significant orchard industry and has in fact, has been revitalized and is refurbished buildings, which were at one time a vital part of the economy of not only the town of Sevastopol, but the state of Wisconsin.
okay, I think in Shakespeare they call that a soliloquy. But
Exactly.
historically significant orchard
industry that
but one second. Okay, what was the next one?
essentially revitalized my neighbor's property.
Did you say world? Did you say world?
Maintain the orchards in my neighborhood.
Okay, I have historically significant orchard.
Not in my backyard.
Historically significant orchard industry, but you said something else, that world renowned or something?
Right, at one time was world renowned, was the largest, Martin Orchards was the largest in the world, cherry producer in the world.
and actually was the economic basis for, and Dick probably should be talking rather than me, but over Michigan, I mean. It was,
certainly both of you make a note when we get into Chapter 7 and we start talking about cultural resources and agriculture. This is the kind of thing that you're going to want to make sure is prominently featured in that chapter. Other things to be, yes, sir?
It's already up there, but they preserve the right to farm.
It can be up there again if you want it.
Do we need to say?
One thought, ma'am. Yes, sir. One moment. Employment opportunities? Employment opportunities in town. Ma'am?
Do we need to say type of farming, like a hobby farm, if it's elk or horses or llamas?
It's up to you. If you think it's important, what do you want to preserve?
The farming isn't just for dairy farming, it could be for hobby type farming?
So you want to preserve hobby farming, or you
Yes.
preserve? Okay.
Genuine farmers.
Next. Yes, ma'am?
Can I add one word to the right to farm and Jason's?
As long as he's comfortable with you adding it, yes.
Right to farm responsibly?
Well, we can add that, but I think there's a difference here. There's a political movement, probably isn't the right word, but there's a political philosophy that's called the right to farm. It includes things like including the right to farm language on deeds. Whenever you buy a piece of land, it'll say, you know, you're moving into that. What you're describing is, I think, slightly different. Now, I'll include that up here too, but so what would you like up here above and beyond the right to farm?
Right to farm responsibly. Because that's different from what you say, Jason.
But do you believe there should be a responsibility there should be that people should farm responsibly, or allow them? Because I don't think anybody's stopping anybody from farming responsibly now. The question would be, should people have to farm responsibly, I guess?
Now they're rewarding them, awarding
responsible agricultural
certificates to them
practices.
for farming responsibly.
Okay. I'm just going to write farming responsibility because I can't come up with anything else at the moment. Others?
The small communities within the town of Sevastopol, like Institute, Family, Whitefish Bay.
They're preserved. Preserve the, and this is something.
That integrity of those small communities.
Absolutely. In planning, in the planning lexicon, there is a word for those communities. Half the towns I've worked with in the past 15 years hate this word. The other half are perfectly fine with it. Exactly. The name of places like Institute, it's a hamlet. That's what it's called. That's what they're known as. A community less than, I don't know, not too far from here. Absolutely said you have to remove that word in every way, shape, or form because it was that alas poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio, that kind of stuff, right? The term hamlet describes Institute and Whitefish and places like that. Now, I'm not saying that for lobbying. I want to say that because if you hate that word as much as this other community hate, I'm not going to put it in the plan. I would prefer to put it in the plan because it's the only word that describes. The word that they chose as a replacement was small crossroads communities. So every place that it said hamlet is now small crossroads communities, which is fine too. It's your plan. You tell me what you want. But you want to preserve can I use that word? Thank you. Because I knew there was a word that would adequately describe that, but I didn't. And that's a good point, and it'll be absolutely explained in a big informational box at the front of that chapter. What I'll do is I'll write integrity of Institute, Whitefish, And the other hamlets. Ooh, a little. Sir.
Hunting and those kinds of activities, whatever that is.
Hunting, fishing. What was the other one?
We should probably have preserved water quality up there. It's under nature.
Sir.
Relationships with adjoining communities.
That's an excellent response. Ma'am?
Preserve natural scenic areas.
Is open space too generic?
Not at all? Others?
I have one.
Fire away. No. You have to condense it down to a short one, though, or allow me to
I'm going to
condense.
start out with what you have up there. Sevastopol has successfully preserved and allowed to exist community establishments such as neighborhood bars, which are an integral part of the town maintaining its sense of community. I think our neighborhood bars, specifically Shartner's on the Shore, the Mill, the Hitching Post, Birmingham's, are part of our community of Sevastopol, and I think if whatever they can do to coexist in the community, they've been here for long established businesses, that we need to do that, and we should not, if they burn down, we should allow them to rebuild.
What was the other one? You said the mill and the hitching post, and you said
Shartner's on the Shore, Birmingham's.
How could you spell?
Birmingham's. Shartner's is S-C-H-A-R-T-N-E-R-S.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hitching post.
Don't forget the V-bar.
Yeah, the V-bar, exactly, V-bar, those sensitive gathering places.
Institute Saloon.
Institute Saloon, yes, Institute Saloon as well. Didn't mean to exclude them.
Those are worth preserving somehow.
Their sense of community. They're our
Other things.
Freedom of choice.
Freedom of. Within the land use planning context, freedom of choice to what? Don't you dare put me on the spot on something that has nothing to do with land use. Freedom, I mean, again, you say it, I'll write it, but I just want to know what I'm writing. And I want to make sure I don't turn my back on anybody who's heavily armed.
We don't want to restrict preserved, it has to do with small businesses, free enterprise, preserve free enterprise.
Enterprise opportunities.
There's someone over here who had a...
Preserve democracy.
Okay, this...
And the Republic.
How about
Freedom of speech.
All right, it's on there, but I do want to... There's not much in a comprehensive plan that can either, I guess, do much about that.
There are no bad ideas in this process, but occasionally one does.
In facilitation, there's a continuum. On one end, there are non-directive facilitators. On the other end, directive facilitators. A non-directive facilitator basically doesn't offer comment, doesn't guide really. I'm nothing more than a tool to record your comments. On the opposite end of the continuum, I'm an active participant in this process. I'm offering ideas and directing you. Both extremes are, in my opinion, wrong and inappropriate for the purposes of meetings like this. But I tend to want to err more towards non-directive as opposed to directive. That said, there are some things that you might want to consider because I know I've worked in a bunch of communities like this and it may pop up. So I may have mentioned last time, barns, silos, old houses, country roads, small woodlands, scenic views, I think, is up there. These are some of the things that make rural character in a community. Are any of those things you want to include up here?
Yes, all of those. I'm not sure if some of them got up there earlier.
Tell me what you'd like up on this list.
Well,
I mean, I was offering suggestions. I don't want to write my thoughts up here.
well, your thoughts were fine though, rural roads, and I'm trying to see if some of those were already up there.
Okay, rural roads.
What were some of the other things you said? Barns, silos, barns.
Historic buildings.
Historic buildings, somebody said?
Bellamy Motors. Historic.
Is anybody? I want to reiterate that cultural resources and historical resources are defined by you. The best evidence of that is I live in Ashwaubenon, I work in Appleton, so every day I drive south on 41, turn around, drive north. A former colleague of mine at Omni wrote the comprehensive plan for the town of Center. If you go to our project website and you look at the Center plan, their number one cultural resource, I'm not making this up, is bean snappers. For those of you who are not familiar with bean snappers, it is a gentleman's club. So that's what they identified as a cultural resource. It is whatever you want a cultural resource to be. So when you think about preserving resources, they're whatever you want to preserve. Yes, sir.
I think nothing looks more, there's more of a comment than anything. I think nothing looks more ridiculous than a barn and silo standing up in the middle of a subdivision. It's neither cultural nor a resource, and to require that to be maintained, I think is not very wise.
Granted, and when we get to that chapter, if we talk about it, feel free. I just don't know how to preserve.
I will remember
something that does. I'm sure, I have no doubt. Again, what we'll do is we'll look at. Sir.
Successfully preserved our border historic bank, our border.
Ah, where did Becky go?
We did or will?
Becky left.
Will. My idea was that we just 20 years in. Build a Berlin Wall around Sturgeon Bay and
Towns can't. The only community that can change borders is an incorporated community. That's the only one here, unless Institute incorporates. Are there other things that we want to preserve? Economic development in the town. Take a minute to think about again, in 2026, what kinds of economic development exist in the community. I'll give you just a minute while I mess around here. Keep firing, please.
Mary Ellen asked me to add a university which would provide jobs and retain young people in the community.
University or a college?
Yes.
We do already have one.
Are there more? Economic development options? Do you want that more? Do you want no more? It kind of goes back to that bedroom community versus gift shops and craft stores, or Honda's new manufacturing facility, or somewhere in between. Somebody mentioned home-based businesses earlier. Is that? I can't write it unless you tell me to write it.
Encourage small business development within the town.
Small business development.
That one's topless clothers.
Well, somebody has to say it before I write it.
Think for yourself.
Home-based business.
More?
Businesses located in existing business centers. In other words, don't expand all over the place.
But located in existing business centers, no more future business centers? Is that correct?
Could be. Yeah, I mean, we have 3 or 4 commercial areas in the town now, and businesses should stay in that area.
Okay.
An established business areas.
More?
We should do something with the gravel roads in the town.
Can't wait to get to the transportation chapter. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure. Businesses compatible with a rural environment. Whatever that means. Farming.
It means we don't need a steel plant.
It could be innovative farming, like vineyards and things like that.
Orchards and vineyards.
Is that it? Does that encompass the economic environment 20 years from now?
Limit commercialization.
Can you expand on that a bit? How do you, I mean, right now we have businesses located in established business centers, so they're not proliferating in places other than. What do you mean by limit?
Say limit throughout the town. That's the best limit.
Restrict size,
Restrict size of what?
Size of
Medium box.
Yes, sir.
We've got at least 3 sawmills in the town and forests that supply the logs to keep these people in business.
So, viable logging.
Forestry. Forest sawmills.
That might also go under the preserving the sites that we have preserved.
If you want it to be there, it will.
And like economic opportunities to support young families.
Okay. Recreational opportunities. Right now, parks is on the list because it was mentioned earlier. Was that more golf courses?
That's a joke.
I gathered.
Hunting and fishing.
And others?
We need to sustain our ballparks.
Good. More? Bike trails. And what was over here?
Water access. Boating.
Motorsports, like ATV trail.
Did you say power sports?
Motorsports.
Motorsports. Sorry, I just didn't hear the first.
Slash ATV. And a dog park.
On Mark Road.
You say dog track or dog park?
Hiking trails.
That includes seating.
Say again.
Does that include seating fish?
Seating fish?
Stocking.
Stocking for recreation?
Yeah. Well,
And I'm not talking about raising fish for fishing. I mean, is it a recreational activity?
fishing is.
Yep, it's up here.
Okay, but you stock it so you can fish. If you don't have a fish there,
And snowshoeing.
so we stock it so we can fish.
Cross-country skiing and snowshoeing.
We do.
Hold that thought. I'll come back to you. Skiing,
He's not supposed to talk.
snowshoeing,
Horse trails,
horse what?
horse trails.
You gotta put golfing up there. Golf courses. Locally owned.
That's true. So we want to make not build any more.
It'll be virtual. You won't have to go out and swing anything.
Snowmobile trail system.
What can you do in a nursing home? Can you do curling in a nursing home?
Self-aboard.
Partial snowshoe.
Canasta,
Beer pong.
beer pong. Hi, Bob.
Driving down the road.
Recreational opportunities.
I think you gotta go to park and get specific, because we'll be so old, we won't be able to play.
Now you all have your own Hoovers or Hummers.
We could take all of the words out of
Finally, a catch-all. These would be the things that you'd be most proud of 20 years from now. If you met someone from another part of the state or another part of the country and they said, what is Sevastopol like? These are the things that you would brag about, the things that you would talk about. They can be any of the things that you mentioned before, but these are the big ones. What are you most proud about in this community?
Attractive corridor, highway corridor.
Attractive highway corridor.
Attractive highway corridor. For me? In our town. In our town. Because we're.
Gateway to Fish Creek.
I got attractive highway corridor. Others?
Shorelines.
Shorelines?
Educational opportunity.
That's kind of writing on getting rid of them.
Yes, sir.
Good, safe place to raise a family.
Nature conservancy areas.
Our hospitality.
Yeah, hitch. Just put down the hitch.
Houston doesn't have
Others?
Preserved our agricultural heritage.
Oh, hold that thought, man. Preserved agricultural heritage. And ma'am, was it exceptional land use?
Yes.
Next. Others?
Sense of community.
Are there more?
Our town roads.
All right, we have town roads, sense of community, exceptional land use, preserved agricultural heritage, attractive highway corridors, shorelines, educational opportunities, safe place to raise family, nature conservancy areas, hospitality.
Aging population, known for our aging. Renowned, not known, but renowned for our aging population.
I suspect there's more out there, but I don't want to push you if you. Yes, sir.
Preservation of the rural character.
Big houses and small lots. Not everybody lives.
Yes, ma'am.
Way out of that. How about preserving our year-round residents by having a homestead exemption on your property, on your individual home, and
Nobody wants to pay taxes.
I'm not.
No taxes.
no taxes. Yeah, no taxes. But preserving our year-round population, our people that live here, if it keeps going like it is, you won't be able to afford to live
Okay,
here.
that's.
So by taking and applying a homestead exemption to the people who this is their primary residence. No property tax, but say the first 150,000 is tax exempt. I've lived other places like that.
Right. The second part of it is an implementation thing.
Okay.
I didn't include that, but I did say preserving year-round population. We'd look at ways that you could do that or achieve that goal. Going once.
Does Eric really speak?
Nope. He was actually going to handle half of this tonight, but somebody only had one mic to hand out, so.
Say, Leo, we got to buy the mic.
They're all yours.
Where can we rename these?
You're welcome. What I would like everybody to do, so you have 3 yellow dots on here. We're essentially finished. I'm going to run through a couple things. As soon as I get to the last slide, then we are done. What I'd like each of you to do is come up here and place your yellow dots next to whatever 1 or 2 or 3 things up here are most important to you. If you feel that the American-made road snow melter is the most important thing to you, you can put all 3 of your dots right here. Don't worry about being aesthetically pleasing or symmetrical. Put them wherever you want them. I would recommend that you not stack them up on top of the others because it won't shoot well in a camera. You look at it good from the side and you'll see this. Well, anyways, so once I finish up with the last couple bits of the presentation tonight, what I'd like each of you to do is take your 3 dots, place them up here. It is a capitalist economy, so if you want to sell your dots to one of your neighbors, that's fine too. So What I'll be doing shortly is getting an email out to Joanne with all the dates that I'm available in the months of, I'm guessing we're not going to have a meeting in December. I'm not sure. It's up to you if you want one, but a lot of times communities don't want one in December between the holidays. But I'll send out all the dates that I'm available in December, January, February, March. And what I'd like to do is identify the dates for the various chapter meetings. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 will be the first meeting. Chapter 4, the second meeting. Chapter 5, the third meeting, etc. Once you as a committee have agreed on the dates, we'll post them up on the webpage. So for those of you who are interested in continuing participation, this is all important. What we've done tonight and what we did the first night is important. But the rubber hits the road on these meetings where we talk about the chapters themselves. That's the structure of your document. And the document is the future of your community. So please keep an eye on the schedule. Again, this happens typically on a monthly basis for the next year and a half. Every month we'll be meeting and talking about a chapter. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a cognitive mapping exercise. So to go to the project website, go to go to that website that was up there. And when you click on projects on the top right hand of the screen, existing projects will pop up. You'd scroll down until you find the town of Sevastopol, and this would pop up. And basically what you'll have is, the PowerPoint that I gave at the first meeting is up there right now, so you can go over it. This PowerPoint presentation will be placed on there probably end of this week, early next week. The chapters, once they're drafted, will be available for review. This kind of stuff, the visions will be up here. We're going to have the SWOT. Actually, I think the SWOT exercise is up there now, isn't it? The tabulated SWOT results? I'll check, but all these things get placed up there. So any questions you have, and if you scroll down on this page a little bit, there's a blue box over here that says contact me or contact or something. If you click on that, it pops up, it brings up my email address. I said this at the last meeting, I'll say it at every meeting. The highest priority we place on our daily activity at work is responding to people who contact us through a website, through the project website. Whatever we're doing stops and we respond to the email. So if you don't have an email response, if you don't have a response to your email within a few minutes, it means that both of us are out of the office. We're not at the desk. It is the most important thing that we do, getting back to you. So I assure you we'll get back to you promptly. That's it. If you have no other questions, or if you have questions, feel free and come up and talk to me. But again, please come up, place your dots next to the things that you want